Hey, folks, my name is Patrick Francie. I am the host and creator of this podcast, The Everyday Millionaire. I want to say welcome and thanks for listening. We're going down a path in this conversation today of understanding our operating system. What is our purpose, our mission, understanding kind of who we are in the context of our life by design, having and being the best we can be, living our best life. My guest today, Alan Cahn, has over 40 years of experience as a very successful entrepreneur, a manager, a trainer. He's an executive coach for really high performing teams in business and education and human services. He has an absolutely amazing track record of success in coaching people with really big commitments to realizing breakthrough results. And he works in international corporate settings as well as with teams directly, relationships, and families. And he is an engaging and what we would call a relational coach. Alan's approach starts by collaborating with individuals or groups to identify what truly matters to them and then supports them in designing clear pathways of actions to fulfill on their vision. Personally and professionally, he has a very unique talent for disruptive, context shifting questions and interactions. This is the sixth time he has been on the podcast, and you are about to find out why. We have an amazing conversation. It took us a while to catch up, but we have caught up, and it was awesome to have it on the show. So, and having said all of that, please remember to like, to subscribe, hit that bell for notification, share it with us, your insights of what you take away from this particular conversation with Alan. Give us some feedback. If you love the show, awesome. And if you don't love it so much, that's okay too. Let us know what it is you don't like so we can put in those improvements. But for now, let's get on with the show with my good friend, Alan Cahn. Alan Cahn, welcome back to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. It's great to see you again.
It's been a while. I almost said welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast because number one, I do those with Stephanie, and you almost fall into that category. Well, not almost, you actually do fall into that. So I don't know where we're going to put this one, but for now, we're going to call it the Everyday Millionaire podcast. You've been on the show. This is how many times you've been on the show now?
This is number 5.
Number 5, and you are always one of the favorites, no doubt about that. So without kind of just relying on your intro, when people are saying to Alan Cahn today, Alan, what do you do? How do you answer that these days? Because it's been a while, and you've covered a lot of ground since the last time we spoke.
I still like the name. I'm a status quo disruptor. Yeah. And an evolutionary accelerator. I'm still of the opinion, that there's a predictable future, which if we don't interrupt the status quo, that's what we'll have in our business, in our relationships, in our life, in our health. And then there's a possible future. And you have to be willing to step outside of that comfort zone, that status quo in every area if you want unpredictable results. And then I say evolutionary accelerator because I don't know, all forecasts of doom and gloom aside, I think we are evolving. Yeah.
We are evolving. Let's unpack it. There's a lot to unpack in that short statement that you just made. But let's start with when you look at and say, somebody who's willing to break the status quo, which means, stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of, what that might look like? An example of where status quo might be keeping us very predictable if we want a predictable future.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Yeah, it's great. Let's take the area of health. There are people I work with and people I know. I don't know anyone who wants to be less healthy. People want to be more healthy. Yeah. And yet people find it very challenging to start new patterns that will give you better health. Our brains want to expend as little energy as possible and want us to expend. So if there's ever a lion or a tiger coming after us, we have all the stored reserve. And as I know you take care of your health. It takes energy to start new patterns. It takes an environment to support you in continuing with those new patterns. And most people think that just the desire or the commitment is enough. And yet we know that there's so many things we would like, we have a desire for, and yet we don't have them because we're living in the same paradigm, taking the same actions and wanting a different result. Yeah.
So when you're working with somebody, let's just hang on to that health conversation for a
Sure.
little bit. It's one that I'm familiar with. I've trained for many, many years and been consistent with it. But I have to say, when we went through the lockdowns, well, some people just embraced it and went, okay, I'm going to be a workout fiend every day, which they did. I kind of went, no, I lost my inspiration, my motivation.
Yeah.
My environment is very, very good. As you know, I got a fantastic gym, an oversized gym, if you will, right
Yeah.
in my just outside my home, like in my yard. Um, but I wasn't really inspired to do it. Now, you spoke of the environment. When you're working with clients and you have that scenario where it's one thing to take somebody that has never gotten off the couch or hasn't been off the couch for years and years and years or whatever that might be. It's one thing to get them fired up and going. But what about somebody like in my case? I'm back to training again, but it took a lot. It is a huge mental shift to get my ass in gear and get back to work. What the hell's going on? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I don't spend any time with what's going on.
Hmm.
I don't spend any time with people looking at why or their explanations. I
Hmm.
only spend, I'd rather look up and forward than back and down. So when we look up and forward, what are the actions that are needed, people need to take? So I have uh, three people who I'm working with now, where every single day we are, they're texting me, and just so that they don't feel like they're deficient, I text them on whether we did what we said we were going to do regarding our health.
Hmm.
Period. Every day. Now, my experience tells me that 30 days is usually for most people enough to then take that structure out and have people move it to once a week,
Hmm.
and then move it. I am a contrarian and breaker, even the rules I set for myself. So I'm looking at what's the least amount of structure we need to put in place to keep people taking new actions until it becomes habituated.
Well, I think you said something there that, at least if I heard it this way, and I think I heard it, which is that what are you working backwards from? So, in other words, forget about why you're not doing it. The question is perhaps why you are doing it. Why do you want to do it? Where are you going? What are you working backwards from? And give yourself a shorter term, maybe spread. Say, okay, well, okay, you want to be a bodybuilder, great. That's a long term plan. But what are you going to achieve in the next 30, 60, 90 days and keep working backwards from that? Is that my.
That's totally. As a matter of fact, I like that you said that because there was a period, I know you have to put things in your calendar, and most people, the only thing they put in their calendar are meetings they're having with other people or
Mhm,
calls. They don't put in when they're going to exercise, when they're going to work out.
mhm,
So I noticed for a number of months, this is 20 years ago, that I had in my calendar workout or exercise,
mhm,
and I'd ignore it.
yeah,
I changed it.
mm,
It says in my calendar, Alan's one for a while it said Alan's body is healthy and fit.
mm,
That's what I was working towards. That
mhm.
was my why, to quote Simon, right? Why? Alan, then for a while I think you've heard me say this, Alan is healthy till the day he dies.
Mhm.
Again, that's what I'm working towards. So we're much more motivated when there's something we're working towards than when there's something we're avoiding.
It's an interesting conversation, and I want to spend a little bit of time on health because I think it's so important.
Yeah,
Again, all the success in the world kind of comes to nothing if health isn't part of it and you can't enjoy it.
yeah.
as I was sharing with you just offline, we were catching up a little bit, and I shared my mom was 95 years old. And I've always been a fitness buff. And what I came to the conclusion about, gosh, not that long ago, I'm going to say 5 or 7 years ago, and another mutual friend of ours, Nick, and him and I, he's a real fitness guy. And I got into it with him one day. We were talking about workouts and training and all the rest of it. Here's what the kind of the moment in time was a bit of a revelation, which is fitness is not the same as wellness.
Mm.
Now, here's a fundamental understanding. My mom's 95. She was not a fitness queen. She didn't go to the gym ever. She did yoga when nobody even knew yoga existed. She was doing it while watching a black and white TV at 6 a.m. before she went to the office. Now, what's interesting about all of that, what she did on a regular basis, at times every day, but always on a weekly basis, was she did the simplest thing in the world. She walked. And she walked 30, 40, 60 minutes when she did go for a walk. And she was doing that at 90 years old, her and two or three. And they had their walkers actually. And so they would rest every so often. But they'd literally walk a kilometer one way, a kilometer back. Here's the point: her fitness wasn't particularly high. Her wellness, well, the proof's in the pudding, is off
Yeah.
the charts. And
Yeah.
that's such an important distinction. I think a lot of people confuse fitness with wellness, and even those who are just getting started. Any thoughts on that? Because I know that you're
A
about being well.
1,000%. So, at age, I'm 73 now. At age 42, I looked forward and I created this future of being healthy till the day I die.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the side, I always wanted to have washboard abs.
Sure.
That's fit. I never got there, and I realized that the main reason I wanted washboard abs was because I wanted to be attractive to women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other side of it, I'm happily married, been there for 45 years. That in with Catherine, it keeps getting better. She doesn't care whether my stomach is flat or not. So I said, I'm not really committed to being fit, but I am committed to being healthy. And I looked at four things that impact health. One is my immune system. So, what am I doing to keep my immune system strong? Uh, uh, Two is what am I doing with regards to rest? What am I doing with regards to aerobic activity?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what am I doing to keep a positive mindset? Because we do know a positive. I bet your mom is one of the most positive people you know.
100%.
It's rare that you meet someone who's 95 who what they are is a complainer. Very, very rare. They so that what am I doing that's having my mindset, my emotions, and my body be healthy and my immune system. And funny, I had an hour break in my schedule today. Catherine and I went for a 45-minute walk, and I brought two. She walks a little sometimes slower than I want to walk, so I brought two 7-pound weights with me. So I'm doing the weights while we're doing our 40-minute walk. And then I don't like to spend a lot of time doing this stuff. I think you were more fitness buff than I ever was, and you still are. But uh, there's an app that I downloaded from the New York Times, the scientific uh, studies, workout regime. I'm up to 16 minutes, 13 exercises, 1 minute each with a 15-second break in between. When I first started, it was 30 seconds
Mm-hmm.
with a 15-second break in between. Now it's a minute. So it's 17 minutes, 13 different exercises. I'm in the aerobic zone the whole time and don't need any equipment.
That's fantastic. But see, that to me is a great program, to follow to stay well. And of
Just
course,
do what you have to.
with that comes the mental health as well. I mean, you're oxygenating the body, you're getting
Yeah,
oxygen flowing, you're taking your mind off whatever stresses you might have in the moment, and it's a great way to stay well in healthy physically, mentally, emotionally. Of course, that all
yeah.
kind of kind of ripple effect, right?
And for me, Patrick, uh, for me, being healthy is a means to an end.
Hmm.
You and I are both, and maybe many of the listeners, we're living a life of purpose. I don't get out. I get out of the bed in the morning not because I have things to do, but there's a commitment that I have, a difference that I want to make, whether I'm on a vacation, whether I'm working, it's all the same, which is staying true to my purpose. So
Mhm.
my health is second because I know, like you said earlier, if I'm not healthy, it's going to be very challenging to live a life of purpose because
Mhm.
my focus is going to be on where my aches and pains are, what pills do I have to take, all those things other than what's my purpose and how do I stay true to it?
Well, it's so interesting is that, I want to get into this conversation of purpose. I also want to touch on operating system.
Right.
There's a fundamental philosophy that I know that you share, which is how I explain it is probably different, but I think the outcome is the same, which is we are the epicenter of our life. We
Yes.
are the center of our universe. And in that being of the center is that around us is our family, our businesses, our friends, or whatever our universe consists of. We're in the middle of it. We
That's
are the CEO of our life, if you want to say it that way, however you want to do it. But ultimately, being the epicenter is that in order for us to look after all of the things that we need to look after, we have to look after ourselves.
got it.
If the proverbial shit hits the fan because we're not staying healthy, or if we're not looking after ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, all of those things, we're no good to anybody. It is the classic case of put your oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
And this is kind of along that. Now, but part of what drives that whole thought process, I think, is that you need to have purpose. So let's dig into, what is, if you're the center of your universe and you're the center of your purpose, if you will, you're
Yeah.
driving the bus.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you describe that? How do you describe it?
Yeah. I I start from a different place and I think I wind up in the same place that you are.
Hmm.
So where I start from is we're part of a whole
Hmm.
rather than I'm the epicenter.
Got it.
We are part of a whole. The whole is called humanity, period. If
Hmm.
there wasn't humanity, you and I wouldn't be here.
It's true.
We are part of something called humanity,
Yeah.
and our lives can be about what are we going to get or what are we going to contribute,
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
Now, I like the image of I'm a little bubble on this evolutionary wave, but my job is to be the best bubble I can be that's part of this evolutionary wave. And I consider you and I part of the same wave.
Hmm.
Really, we are part of the same, which is why we resonate and we recognize, you recognize people who are part of the same wave, whose roots are in the same soil. How
Hmm.
we're expressing may be different, but being having, you mentioned operating system, being someone who's has an operating system of arrogance and self-importance, it's been important for me to create a different narrative than I'm the epicenter of the universe, but I'm part of something that's bigger than me, that was here before me, that will be here after I'm gone. And what's the contribution I'm going to make? Now,
Hmm.
in order to make that contribution, I need to be healthy, period. Yeah, I need to have my relationships be healthy. I need to have I need to be a demonstration of health.
You're right. You're right. So you come at it a slightly different way, but the result is pretty much the same. So it's kind
Mm,
but I love that perspective.
yeah,
That's what I love when I have these
yeah,
conversations with you is the
yeah,
expansion of that perception. Now you touched on purpose. I
yeah,
mean, gosh, it's got to be one of the most asked questions,
yeah,
or I don't know what my purpose is. I don't, and then I don't know what my passion is. And, like there's all these kind of phrases and words being used. Let's talk a little bit about it because I know you do work in that
yeah,
space. When somebody says to you, Alan, I don't know my purpose, you got to help me.
yeah.
Where do you start?
So I start with defining what a purpose is.
Hmm.
And, it's not the definition, it's a definition.
Hmm.
So a definition of purpose is like a mission statement, a direction, an impact, an outcome, a purpose. It's not a goal. So let me say what it's not. It's not a goal. It's not what you're going to do. It's the impact you're going to make.
Mhm.
End of story. Impact where? Everywhere you go. And it's the impact you're committed to making, even if you don't go there. The analogy that I like to use is you and I were invited to a party. And we were invited to the party because the organizers of the party wanted us to make a contribution to that party, to impact the quality of the party. So that party's going on right now. There's 8 billion people at it.
Mhm.
Why did they invite Alan to the party? Why did they invite Patrick? I
Mhm.
say why I'm invited to the party. And you get to say,
Mhm.
no one's going to tell you, here's your purpose. No, you get to say. So I said I was invited to the party because the organizers wanted all hearts to be full and all beings to be enlightened.
Mhm.
Full stop. So in every interaction with you, with my wife, with the folks at the coffee shop, on the airplane with my clients, am I staying true to that purpose? Am I leaving people with a better access to their hearts being full and to being enlightened?
Mhm. Here's where, okay, let me just be on the other side of that for a
Yeah,
minute, and I'm going to kind
please.
of go into it. And I do have an understanding of where you come from because we've worked together many times over
Yeah,
the years. But let me just kind of be the naive one here and ask the fundamental question. What you just said is that's pretty big. Like that's really profound. Like I don't even know what that, I don't even know what that would mean for me.
yeah, yeah,
And so how do I get to that? Like how do
yeah,
I, like I'm now 40 years old.
yeah,
I've got 3 kids, a wife, I got a career. I'm going through the TikTok every freaking day. The stress is the shits and my don't have enough money and interest rates are going up.
yeah.
The world's coming to an end. How the hell am I supposed to have any other purpose but to survive and look after my family?
I love that you said it that way, Patrick, because that's what's there by default.
Hmm.
Our brain's job is to have us survive.
Hmm.
End of story. And it's working full time to do that, looking out for threats, coming up with strategies, avoiding things, going towards other things. So our brains do not care if we're fulfilled or if we're happy unless they've been retrained.
Hmm.
By default, our brains want to keep us alive.
Hmm.
So our brains in the morning, the first thing our brain thinks of is what do I have to do today? Not who am I going to be today? But what do I have to do today? Which is why most people are tired at the end of the day because all they were doing was doing things. They weren't being something. So, how to find your purpose is what, when you interact with somebody and you're inspired by the impact you had on them, what is that impact? Or if you have 3 kids, what is it that you really want for your kids? And people will start, well, I want them to have good jobs. I want them to be healthy. Good. But what's the experience you want your children to be living inside of for the rest of their lives? Oh, well, I want them to be grateful and
Hmm.
connected. Okay. So maybe your purpose is people are great, living in gratitude and being connected to others. So what is it that inspires you when you have that impact on another? That's one of the simple ways to have people find their purpose in just a short conversation.
So when we talk about our purpose, so for example, when you look at your purpose, somebody could say, what's the expectation? So in other words, what are you getting in return? What's in it for you? What's in it for you?
Oh, that,
And you
yeah.
know, when we look at purpose, from my definition of it, is we're living our purpose. We're just being true to ourselves without an expectation around it, and it's because we're living true to who we are. What lights us up? What where our heart takes us, where our soul takes us, our spirit. It isn't about okay, well, now you owe me. But can you expand on that a little bit? I'm probably not
Just
doing a
let
great
it
job.
You just said it better than I would have said it.
Okay.
When you're living true to your purpose, you disappear. You disappear inside of your purpose. Life becomes an opportunity to fulfill on you, to get better and better and better. And by better and better and better, what I mean is more reliable for staying true.
Hmm.
So the game I'm playing with my life is to be reliable for living true to my purpose 24/7, even in my dreams.
Hmm.
And why I put even in my dreams in there is because I like big games.
Hmm.
Even though I don't know that I can achieve that ever, that's something to strive towards, to
Hmm.
stay reliable. When people are threatening me, to stay reliable to my purpose. When I've just produced an amazing failure, to stay reliable to my purpose, true to my, when I've just produced a great success and I'm getting all this acknowledgement, good, stay reliable, stay true to my purpose. So that's the direction. And I like looking at purpose also, Patrick, as a direction. I used to call it, I think when we first met, your true north.
Hmm.
But I don't like that anymore because, if you keep going north, eventually you start going south. So I call it my true east. It's got that wisdom in the east and the orient and all. So you can keep going east forever.
Hmm.
You never run out of east. You do run out of north.
Hmm.
So in every interaction, was I going east? Was I going northeast? Was I going west? Was I standing still? So in every interaction, I can say, was I true to my purpose or not? And if I wasn't, what do I need to do to true it up?
Is it fair, Alan, to say that purpose is not about you?
Yes, it's
It's
about the
about
contribution.
the contribution that you're being. Now, what gets in the way?
Can I just put
Please do.
one? Yeah. It's, by the way, it's the same work I do with large companies and
Hmm.
medium-sized companies. Is I don't, if their reason for being in existence is to make a profit, it's about them.
Hmm.
If their reason for being in existence is to serve the customers, serve the community, serve the shareholders, have the employees feel like it's the best place they've ever worked, don't destroy the environment while they're doing it, be a contribution, then the company's much more likely to be successful if they have a useful service or product that they're offering. Much more likely.
Hmm. Well, you make it really good. Okay, so I want to go back a couple
Yeah,
things, and again, is that you've been playing this game for many, many, many years. I mean, your history goes back into the early days of landmark work, which you did extensively for many
yeah,
years. You became an independent many years ago.
yeah,
You've worked with some of the biggest and best corporations in the world, along with some of the biggest names in the world. And when you look at this body of work that you do, it's interesting because even at that level, men and women are looking for purpose. They're still trying to find and go there. So it's not like this is for the mediocre or the meek or the just getting started. It's at every level. Purpose is real. It gets in people's way.
and Patrick, it's something I'm moved by you and by where the conversation goes. Because I just was thinking, you talked about mediocre at different ages. Why isn't our education system oriented around in fourth grade? What's your purpose?
Don't even get
What's,
me going.
rather than 3 + 3 = 6, what's your purpose? And are you living true to your purpose? Because I have two grandkids, they're 10 and 13. And I'll tell you, they have purpose
Hmm.
already, and their lives are different than your average 10-year-old, your average 13-year-old. If you look at them, if you hang out with them, they've got wisdom
Hmm.
because they're living true to something other than immediate gratification.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go.
Mind you, they still have screen time. I'm playing
Of
video
course.
games with them and all of that, but there's a purpose behind it.
I want to go back though
Yeah,
to. I don't want to miss the question I wanted to ask out of that,
please.
which is
Yeah, I
this.
cut you off. Go
No, that's
ahead.
good. That's good. That's perfect. The question that I was going to get to, one of many that I still have,
Yeah.
was what the hell gets in the way of people, number one, discovering their purpose, first
Yeah.
off. And even if they find it, how do you get off? I can tell you that I've got off track somewhat in my purpose, more built around how I got off track on some values, my values, which is connected. But let's just talk about what takes people off track or gets in their way of getting to it, based on your experience. Because, and I know there isn't any one thing or any,
Oh,
it's just a thing, but
yeah.
give me, based on your experience, what is some of the things that people bump up against?
Yeah. So it's anything that reactivates our ego.
Mm, mm-hmm,
Anything, or as Jung would say, anything that's in our shadow.
mm-hmm,
Uh, Anything that we see as a threat. You know, uh, I'm thinking of the story of Jesus on the cross right now.
mm-hmm,
So there he is crucified, and what comes out of his mouth at the end of his life is, "Forgive them, Lord. They know not what they do."
mm-hmm,
No, his purpose was one of love.
mm-hmm,
So a practice was forgiveness. Yeah. So when your life's, what gets in the way is your ego, your sense of importance, your sense of life is about you, not about the contribution you're going to make. And
mm-hmm,
that's hardwired. We are hardwired to have our lives be about us.
mm-hmm.
When when almost everybody wakes up in the morning, the first thing on their mind is, what do I have to do today? Not what does anybody else have to do today? How does my body feel? So we're oriented around this thing right here, and this thing right here wants to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So putting on top of this thing right here a sense of purpose can seem to go counter. I happen to think that if everyone on the planet realized that their desire to survive rather than live a life of purpose is what's getting in the way of the planet working, we'd have a different planet that we're on,
Mm-hmm.
completely different. It wouldn't be, John Lennon, I, me, or George Harrison, I, me, my. It would be a we rather than an I, living a we life rather than an I life.
So when you look at, and I want to just talk a little bit about ego, you're uh, got far more experience in terms of kind of describing it, defining it. But you
Yeah,
look at ego, and many think of ego, they think of, I don't know, they think of arrogance, and they think of somebody who's, maybe, full of themselves. But that's
self
really
self-importance. Self,
self-importance. But
yeah,
that's only one description. I mean, I look at ego, and what we understand about ego is that it also protects oneself. So in other words, we talk about tall poppy, and somebody'd say, well, that's ego. But somebody else would look at it and go, I don't want, my ego doesn't want to be seen.
yeah,
It wants to hide because it wants to protect itself from being discovered, from
yeah,
being seen as a fake or a fraud or whatever. So ego plays on both sides of
totally.
that equation, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because you used the word earlier, and I don't know why ego came out, but I think ego came out of my mouth because it's more commonly understood than the phrase you used earlier called operating system.
Mm-hmm.
So we each have, by the age of 10 or 12 or younger, an operating system, a patterned way of interacting with the world,
Mm-hmm.
of being boastful, of being secretive, we have a patterned way of dealing with threats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's any patterned behavior, that stimulus response is going to get in the way of us living a life of purpose, period.
Yeah.
Because a life of purpose is a creative life. It's not automatic. It never comes automatically to live a life of purpose.
Okay, let me throw in a question here because I
Yeah,
know listeners are going to be asking it.
Good.
Okay, what has this got to do with me making a living and making money? Like, how do that all come together? Like, what am I just doing? Walking around zen like, in
Yeah.
this ethosphere of, feeling good? What is it the hell you talking about, Alan?
There is. I was just reading a book called The Mystic Manager, which is all about how do you run businesses and stay true to your purpose.
Well, okay, so good question. Why don't we answer that?
Yeah, I love it. And as you know, I am very successful,
Mhm.
and you can be very successful living a life of contribution. Tony Hsieh, may he rest in peace, started Zappos. The first 3 years, there was only one purpose for Zappos existing, and it wasn't to sell shoes. It was extraordinary customer service. He lost money doing it, but he stayed true to, he said, if I build a company based on extraordinary customer service, profits are going to come out of our ears. And they did.
Mhm.
They did. So businesses that are, or, you know, I, if you go to work, if you're on a salary and you're going to work to fulfill your purpose, and your purpose is a big one, rather than you going to work to fulfill your paycheck, you'll probably be the one that gets promoted and gets a raise because your work will stand out.
Because you will stand
You'll be on a mission.
because you show up differently.
The folks who work in your shop. You were just talking about them. They're
Mhm.
on a mission.
Mhm.
Now, do they pay attention to the bottom line? Of course.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is the scoreboard. The bottom line is not the goal. It's the
Mhm.
scoreboard for, do you have a good business plan? Are you providing a good service? Are you
Mhm.
taking care of your employees? The bottom line is the scoreboard. But if your company's built around the bottom line, it has less of a chance of being a success.
I want to. I'll share a little story about that. So we did talk about it just prior to getting on our call today, and I was talking about my stores in Edmonton, and
Yeah,
and my team is just crushing it. They're really doing a great job. But I went through a lot of pain through COVID. I had to shut down one of my stores, lay off staff. It was just a real tough time for everybody.
yeah,
But what I came back with was a really core group of guys, a core team of people, if you will, that just we sat down and one of the things I said is that here's an opportunity for you all to step up and to really create what's next for this business and for yourselves. I'm a I'm you know I don't even have a key to my store anymore. Like I literally go into the store once a quarter. I have calls once a week with the team that take about an hour. We touch base, we look at financial statements. It's all to say this: when I sat down with them almost 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, what I said to them, let's get really clear on a couple of things. What is the environment that you want to work in? What is the culture that you want to stand for so that when people show up, if they're going to be a fit into this culture? What is the environment? And what do we stand for as a team? So, what is that front facing experience we want people to have when they walk in the door? When I had that conversation with them, Alan,
yeah,
it was literally, we're going to set and say, what is the environment? Well, I want the environment. We want it organized. We want it clean. We want it bright. We want it, airy. We want people to come in and feel like this is a great space to hang out in. And
yes,
culturally, we want service focused. We want people that got our backs when we're working as a team. We know that there's no gossip. There's no crap in the space, and it's just a culture of support, having fun, getting stuff done, looking after our clients. And I can tell you that it has at times been difficult because we've actually had to say no to certain staff or certain potential staff that
yeah,
we know they got a great track record,
yeah.
but when you interview them 2, 3, 4 times, you're going, you won't last 5 minutes in this environment, in this culture, because you just don't fit.
That's right. So great, Patrick. I love that you said that. I went to do a training with an executive team a few weeks ago, and they had done the work that your team did. They did the work of their values. They had
Hmm.
five or six core values, and I created my colleague and I created a little Excel spreadsheet. We put each value up on a screen, and then they had to type in on their phone on the form 1 to 5. To what degree do they stay true to that value? And then 1 to 5, to what degree do they think the team is staying true to the value? And then
Mhm.
we projected it on the screen, and there was a big gap between what people thought the team was staying true and what they thought personally. And that's where we went to work, not on their business model, not on their plan, but to where is the gap between what their espoused values are and how they're actually operating. And then they picked one to focus on above all, and that was integrity, because that's where the biggest gap was. They weren't reliable for doing what they said they were going to do.
Okay, well, now you opened up another door. Okay,
There's so many doors here.
there's so many holes and rabbit holes we can go down, but they're important. These are important conversations. I want to know from your perspective, and
Yeah,
I've often used my own definition, or a definition, I guess I don't own it. I've
yeah,
heard it and I've used it for years. How do you, or what do you define integrity as? How do you define it in a way that is easy to understand?
yeah,
Because it seems to be a very misunderstood word.
yeah. Well, let's talk about what it isn't. It's not morality.
No.
uh, Integrity, something has integrity when it's whole and complete. So, uh, a bicycle, when it has the spokes,
Hmm.
if it's spinning and it's wobbling, when it spins, you could say the tire is lacking integrity. It's it won't function as well.
Hmm.
So what do you have to do? You true it up. You tighten the spokes, you loosen the spokes so it spins true. So integrity is living true to something, is operating true to something, is doing things the way they're meant to be done,
Hmm.
is in the terms of your word. Integrity isn't keeping your word. If you keep all of your promises are too small. But
Hmm.
integrity is honoring your word.
Hmm.
So if I give my word to increase performance by 5% in this quarter,
Hmm.
then if I have integrity, I'm going to come up with a plan that'll have me increase it 7%.
Hmm.
So in case I miss it, I still keep my word. If it
Hmm.
gets towards the end of the quarter and I'm not going to hit my 5%, integrity is telling, hey, Patrick, I promised 5%. I'm going to end at 4.2.
Hmm.
I want you to know that's not what I promised, but I'm
Hmm.
not going to keep it. And here's what I'm going to do to compensate, to make up for not keeping it. So it's not about keeping your promise, but it's about honoring your word. And when it's like if you're going to be late for a meeting, you don't just show up 20 minutes late. Good, I'm in traffic. I'm going to be 7 minutes late.
Hmm.
Letting people know when you're not going to be keeping your word is part of what operating with integrity is.
So let me bounce some things off you. So I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. And when I hear what you're talking about, I look at that as integrity is being and keeping your word, doing what you say you're going to do, as a statement of character as well.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful. Agreed.
Okay. So I want to take it to the next level. I always hold, I don't want to use those words. I hold integrity
Yeah.
by my primary definition,
Yeah.
which is, and when it go back to integrity being structural. So in other words,
Good.
it could
Yes.
be a bridge, it could be a bike wheel, as you said, it could be a
Totally.
car, whatever. It's structural integrity. When I look at my own structural integrity, when I say if I'm in integrity, being
Yeah.
in integrity, it means I'm being true to myself.
Thank you. That's the ultimate integrity, is true to yourself.
Got it. And here's something that's interesting. And I got this many, many years ago. Somebody said a drug dealer could, in fact, be in integrity. He could
Totally.
be totally operating integrity, being that he is true to his word. When he says, I'm going to do this, he does that. When
Yeah.
he sells you this and says it's 90%, blah, 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 it is that. He is totally in integrity with who he says he is.
However, one place where he's not or she's not in integrity is as a citizen.
Right. Would you class that as moral integrity,
No,
perhaps?
no, because for
Societal integrity.
societal integrity, as a
Right.
member of society, that person lacks integrity. But
Yeah.
you've often heard there's honor among thieves, right? They have their
Sure.
own code. They have their own code. For sure. So within that culture, they're operating with integrity, but as members of society, they're not.
Yeah. And I
With
think,
no moral judgment on it. Because as
Mhm.
soon as they legalize that drug that they're selling, now they're operating with complete integrity.
It really is interesting. So,
Well, but let's do one more because a lot of people on this call are in relationships.
mhm,
So, what does it mean to operate with integrity as a father,
mhm,
as a mother, as a son, as a daughter, as a partner?
mhm,
Well, it means you have clear agreements that you've aligned on and you're honoring them. And when you know you're not, you're responsible for communicating and cleaning up the mess.
mhm. Here's a fundamental that I think when we go back to integrity, and
Yeah.
these are lessons that I've learned.
Yes.
You're familiar with some of them, but certainly when understanding, okay, purpose, when understanding operating system, when literally being cognizant of living true to your values, first off, you have to know what your values are.
Yes.
So you may be operating out of integrity and not even realize it because you're not clear on your values, yet they're deep down,
I,
right?
Patrick, I
And
have people. Sorry, do you want to say something else before I say something?
yeah, so that all of a sudden you realize that you're uncomfortable, you don't feel right, you're probably feeling stressed, anxiety, you may even be physically manifesting an illness, and you can't put your finger on it until somebody one day sits down with you and goes, you know something, have you ever considered what your values are versus how you're living your life? And they look at you and go, what the hell's a value? What are you talking about right now? And the next thing you know, a whole door opens up to understanding your life in a way more meaningful way.
It's so great. When I'm working with executives, oftentimes, or middle level managers as well, I'll have them spend a whole, a week in between sessions identifying what's their purpose, what are their values,
Mm-hmm.
what are their values, what's the work environment in which they're going to perform the best,
Mm-hmm.
and write it up. It's almost like their mission statement. This is my purpose. These are my values. This is the way that I work, and this is the environment I work best in. And then we look: are they working in the right place? Because if
Mm-hmm.
what their values are different than what the owner's values are, the corporate values are, they're probably not going to be at home there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to be there. They're not going to do their best performance. People who are doubting the leader of the company aren't going to be usually the best performers
Mm-hmm.
because they're questioning whether they're in the right place or whether they have the right boss.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that when we consider in that space, when you think about, and I've employed hundreds of people over the
Yep.
year, and you've worked and coached thousands of
Yes.
people, of employees,
Yep.
as well as business owners.
Yep.
But you really start to understand that you can go through life hating your job every single day, grinding it out, thinking that's what it is,
Yep.
complaining about what's happening at the pointy end of the spear, and literally not aligning with the values of the management team and or the owner. For whatever reason, you just don't align, but you grind it out.
Yep.
That's living a life out of integrity because you're not being true to who you are, and who you are is not that. It is not being that way. And I shine a light on it because I see it all the time, because I've happened to be working with it. Is I see it in the government all of the time. I see government bureaucracy, and I see those individuals, the rank and file, just grinding it out, but they're got the golden handcuffs at the end of it. I'm going, seriously, you're going to live your life this way for 30 years
I
just so
know.
you get a pension? And then what?
Crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. My part of my work, part of my intention is that people have the experience when they're going to work that they're getting paid to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't create that in their job, I it help them to engage in a serious conversation is, are they in the right job?
Mm-hmm.
Life's too short not to enjoy it and not to be fulfilled. That whole notion that it's going to be better later, it's going to be better later is,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in playing that game or seeing too many other folks play that game.
But here's the thing, Alan, and this is, I'd like to kind of unpack this a little bit with you,
Great.
because you've worked with so many owners, as have I, and I've
Yep.
been an owner. I've been in this position,
And
as
still
I'm
are.
sure
Yep.
you have. You get an employee, and you all of a sudden you get clear on your business, where it's going, what it's doing, the culture, the alignment, the environment. You get a team all going one way, and then ultimately it always seems the star pupil, the star sales guy, the star accountant, or whatever it might be, you're in there doing a waltz and he wants to do the foxtrot, or he wants to do a little rap. It's like, no, that doesn't fit. And the next thing you know, you got to let go of one of your best people, and that is painful.
It
How the
is.
hell do you handle that?
By swallowing the bitter pill. It's
Mm-hmm.
painful. It is. Or by knowing and telling the truth about it, that you're compromising.
Mm-hmm.
I'm compromising, and I know I'm compromising, and I'm going to compromise for 6 more months because
Mm-hmm.
I'm unwilling to take the risk of letting them go and watching the profit go down and whatever. But here's my plan B. I'm looking for people. I'm going to get the right person to replace them. But for now, I'm compromised. In other words, I'm not going to be cut off my nose to spite my face. I know, but you got to tell the truth about it. Now I'm working with one company where they're not telling the truth about it. There is someone who's in a senior position who isn't honoring their values. They're just not. But
Mm-hmm.
they're counting on him for his results, and that's a choice an owner gets to make. Mine is not to judge. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess as here's my belief, and
yeah,
I'm probably full of shit, but I'll say it anyways,
yeah.
is that in my experience, I've done both.
Yes,
I've kicked the can down the road, put it off, and that was really expensive,
yeah,
and
yes.
it was costly.
I'm
Plus,
familiar. I'm familiar with one of the times you did that,
yes, and and I'm out of integrity that whole time, really.
and you were suffering.
And just because I know it doesn't make it right, you
No,
know. And
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 you
and
were
the
suffering.
reality of it is that, and I know even on a sales, and I've seen this, had this experience in a couple of my businesses over the years, where you get rid of that kind of misaligned. I don't want to make them wrong,
No,
because it's not that they're wrong, they just don't fit.
they have different values.
They'll probably thrive in a totally in another environment. They'll rock the world. Good for you. But here's the other thing: is I believe what I've come to believe on both sides, whether you're the owner or the person that's working in that environment, rip the frickin' band-aid off and create the space for the universe to do what the universe does, and that is fill the void with the magic that we are aligned with, because it just can't help but show up if you stay true to it. That's
I,
my philosophy. What's your thoughts?
I agree. You and I love each other because we have very similar philosophies. But you can't tell someone to do that.
No.
Uh, you can model it. You can do it yourself. But the guy or the gal who's running the company, if they find it, they've got to learn it for themselves that that's the best way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you only learn it by yourself by doing it the wrong way a couple of times and seeing it didn't pay off.
And I can tell you that in my 40 years of business, it seems all of my lessons are the hard way and the most expensive way. That's what it seems like. I know it's not the truth, but today that's what it feels
Some
like.
of us, some of us have harder heads than others, and it takes more work for it to
Uh,
get through.
oh boy. But it's important, I think, to have these conversations and to really kind of self-assess. One of the things that I think is we kind of, I think this many years in, the people we work with and how we've evolved, what do you do when you're working with somebody and you're trying to bring them to just creating, I think the first part of any journey starts with the awareness that you need to go on a journey,
Yes. Good. Good.
you know, and
Yeah.
self awareness. It seems people are not as self aware as we think they would be, or because we live in this, I don't know. I find that I'm in this constant world of self assessment and self awareness and trying to improve and be better and kind of looking at what I could have done better, whatever the story is.
Yep.
And I know that many of our clients are that way as well, but it's not all that common. And
Oh,
people don't want to, many don't want to go on the journey. What the
it's
hell's with
uncommon.
that, Alan?
It's
Come on,
uncommon.
you're older than me. Tell
It's
me what's with that.
it's uncommon, and our job is to make it more common,
Mm,
but it's uncommon.
mm.
It,
It is
again,
uncommon.
going back to education, it's not that you and I weren't raised to be self-aware. We weren't
Hmm.
raised in that environment where that was valued. We had an experience at whatever age we did that went, aha, that's the answer.
Hmm.
Being more aware, being more aware, being more aware. And we both started playing that game, knowing that it's a game that has a mountain with no top.
Yeah.
Yeah. No top.
And it, yeah, there is no end to that game.
Yeah.
The thought process, when I think about the different bodies of work that you've done, and that you've shared some of your insights with me over the years, and that we've done it, there is no point of entry for anybody. There's tools that you look at, but you have to kind of discover what you're bumping up against. One of the books that I know you're familiar with. And I'm just, gosh, I could name dozens of them as you could, but
Yep.
a book that showed up for me is Untethered Soul.
Sure.
And, Michael Singer and the work that he's done over the years, but really understanding what's underneath all of these things that we're trying to get to.
Yes.
Now, when you're working with clients, is that a body of work that you're kind of embracing and, asking those questions?
I yeah, I'm not sure what the questions are because although I'm familiar with the book, I didn't read it.
Okay.
Okay, even though it's been recommended by many,
Yeah.
so now I already have it on my list of books that I ought to read someday, but I'm not, so I don't have to even write it down again. Uh, but there are fundamental questions, and there is there's a guy out of Harvard. He taught at Harvard Business School, and he looked at executives, and he said extraordinary executives, the leaders of the leaders in the executive field, they've all had what he's called a crucible moment.
Hmm.
And for some of us, that's what it takes to turn towards self awareness. So he defines a crucible moment where everything fell apart. Maybe your business tanked. Maybe your marriage failed. Maybe there was an illness that left you. But the sentence that you said to yourself, the narrative is, what got me here won't get me to where I want to go.
Hmm.
And until you get that some level of an experience that, yeah, all the success I've had, it's still not going to get me where I really want to go. I don't think people turn towards self awareness
Mm.
because they're still driven by external rather than internal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So,
a great insight. That's a great insight. Those are, and I think that's probably where we experience people in, those individuals that, no, they're good. They're going to do what they do and they're fine to ride off into the sunset, only ever doing that. And it's enough.
yeah,
We
exactly.
live in a little bit different
We do.
world where it never seems to be enough. There's
Yeah.
always something else, another world to conquer, another, investigation to take on, another
Yeah.
layer of development that we can embrace to
Yeah.
be better. But that goes back to, for example, your calling is that in order to live that calling, you have to continually be upping your game.
Oh my God, for sure. And it's interesting. the more successful one gets, the more challenging sometimes it is to stay true to one's calling, because that success has a certain intoxication to it. And
Mhm.
you can get lured into it and seduced by it, rather than, okay, no, those are trappings. They're wonderful. I'm glad I have them. And here's my purpose. So I, am always coming up with new themes of where I need to keep developing myself and need to keep growing. Always.
Mhm.
Not to make my business better, but
Mhm.
to keep me, Bob Dylan had a line, he not busy being born is busy dying. So you're
Mhm.
either expanding or you're contracting. And
Good
if you
line.
and
Good
if you
line.
if you're staying the same, you're contracting because the universe is expanding. So you and I are on a growth trajectory for ourselves, and we put ourselves on that.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's lonely to be on there. Sometimes we're judged by others for the values that we honor, and you and I are both committed to staying true to it.
There's something that I'm interested in from your perspective, Alan, which is, part of living a calling and being, one of the needs, one of the human needs, and this is where I think we cross over perhaps into ego, and we have to be careful of it. But as human beings, we need to be a contribution,
Yeah,
and we actually need significance. And that's, I think, where the line can get a little bit crossed, because what does significance really represent? If
yeah,
you're being a contribution, you're being appreciated, you're making a difference in the world, that's going to give you significance. It doesn't mean to be necessarily be elevated or, of course, be put on a pedestal,
yeah,
but that's where meaning in life works. That's
yeah,
where significance kind of exists. And I
yeah,
know it's a funny little line, and I'm not even clear on if there's a question in that,
yeah.
or it's just a statement. I don't know if you can go anywhere with that thought process.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know you're using the word significant differently. I've always, looked at significance as heavy, but I
Mm.
know you're not meaning it as heavy and
No.
weighty and oh, you're loaded with significance, but it's other
Uh,
people appreciating
yes.
the difference you're making.
Yeah.
And, I think as uh, employers or managers, creating an environment where the people in it feel appreciated. It's not just what you want from them, but you're creating this learning environment
Mm.
where mistakes, it's okay to make mistakes because we there are opportunities to learn, and
Mhm.
where people are validated for what they provided. I think that's critical for having healthy workplaces and, on the personal level, healthy relationships, you know?
Yeah. It's I think that's I love what you gave me there, because what I'm going to take away from that is, that the word, yeah, I think you, and I want to go back to it, is, appreciation
Yeah.
is another way. That's really actually, I think, what I meant when I'm talking about significance.
That's
It's
what I
really
heard.
about
That's what I heard.
appreciation and perhaps validation that
Yeah.
I matter.
Totally. And on the one hand, on the journey that we're both on, we want to be able to generate that experience independent of, what's going on around us. To get biblical again, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. You know,
Mhm.
one of the lessons I continue to have to learn, and I've learned it to a degree, but I'm not saying I'm done with it, is when I'm not being perceived by people I care about the way I want to be perceived.
Mm.
I think they're judging me, and their judgments are wrong. And I have 20 people who agree, but it still matters when that one person sees me that particular way. I'm not one of those people who says, yeah. It gets to the degree that it gets to me is the degree that I'm still attached to what people think, rather
Mhm.
than am I being true to my values.
It's interesting, and I don't know the exact quote, but it's not about what people think about you. It's what you think that it's what you
You
think
think
people
they
are
think
thinking about
exactly,
you.
totally.
And it's such a mess, isn't it? Yeah,
No,
that we get
hey,
into. So, so when we look at
There's what you think about you, what they think about you, and then what you think they think about you.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
All
it's
three,
such a
all
mess.
three seem to matter.
Yeah, humans, we're such a mess. So,
Yes.
I want to go a little bit into and tell me where this fits in when
Good.
we talk about operating system.
Yes.
You've been married a very, very long time,
Yep.
45 years,
45.
45
40,
years. No,
sorry, we've been together 46. We
yeah,
got married in 79, so we married 44.
44 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at, the relationship. What does it take to be in that relationship? And I know it's not a straight line. It
Yeah.
goes up and down. And I think that, Stephanie and I talk about it in our relationship. We've been together 30, we've a little over 30. We've been married 27 years. Like when we get into it, we get into it. Like we go hard. And but there's a few things in terms of how we argue. Number one is we argue, we never insult, we never mean to hurt or take, we can debate shit really hard and we can be angry with each other, but it's just in how we argue. It's not about the other person or making them feel bad or complaining about how they look. Like, it's none of that.
Yeah.
And out of that comes often growth. We may pout for a day, but we always come back to each other knowing and being able to review, reflect, and go, okay, here's where we need to get to. So it's not a straight line to
Oh,
have an amazing relationship.
oh,
And the one agreement we do have is that we just will never leave each other.
yeah. Yeah. Someone was a young person about 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. They were getting married, and they said, anybody who's been married for 20 years or more, write in this book the keys to staying married for 20 years or more. And somebody wrote, don't leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
The key to a long marriage is not getting divorced.
get the
Um,
book. Now, Patrick, to what you said, some of my work is with couples, but either couples in a work setting, where they're colleagues, or couples in a relationship setting, where they're lovers. And something I got exposed to maybe 3 years ago. It was called do a retake. So anytime you get into one of those things with your partner, the first person to notice it says, wait a second, I think we need to do a retake here.
mm,
And then you actually replay it, being your better selves. So you don't just talk about what went wrong. Here's the way I could have said that. And then how would you have spawned? And you actually play it out like someone just gave you a new script, because it's all up here. What you're doing then is creating that neural pathway. So the next time you might be more likely to take that new script rather than repeat the same old fight. Do a
mhm,
redo, do a replay. My parents had a thing, that they said, never go to bed angry. So
mhm,
resolve that mistake, that breakdown, resolve it before you go to bed, and then do a redo,
mhm,
do a do over, take a
mhm.
mulligan.
You know, there was an exercise. I don't know if it was you that gave me the exercise or Anurag, and this was years ago
Yep,
in World of Relationship. And I share this because
yep,
I will still do this every so
yes,
often when I
yep,
know I'm not being my best self.
sure,
And that is, the exercise was this: for the weekend. I think that was the assignment. It was a
yep,
Friday. For the rest of the weekend, everything you do, you put Stephanie on the list. So in other words, if I'm going to go up and if I'm going to go grab a glass of water, Stephanie, I'm going to grab a glass of water. Would you like me to get you a glass of water?
got
She
it.
says, I'm going to go up and take a shower. Let me go and run the water for you. Make sure it's hot. Like, think in terms of, what am I going to do for my significant other every time I make a decision, every time I make a move? How will I include her? How will I fold her in so that she's part of it? Like, something that puts her in front of all of the decisions I'm making on at any given time. So it was like, focus on her for the weekend. And it was, I think I described the exercise as I remember it anyways. It's kind of how I do it anyways now.
I'm stealing that one. You didn't get that one from me, but that's going into my toolkit, and that's going to be coming out of my mouth next week with some of the couples I work with. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you something. I did that for 3 or 4 days the first time,
Yeah.
and one night we curled up in bed and Stephanie rolled over to give me a kiss goodnight, and she says, "I just wanted to ask you one question. What did you do with my husband? Where did he go? And is this a prank?" and I burst out
Great.
laughing.
And on the other side of it, one of the promises that when our relationship got what I call stale, and it started becoming transactional.
Mm-hmm.
We were relating to each other, who was going to do this and who was going to do that, but it wasn't exciting, it wasn't joyous, it wasn't fulfilling. We weren't expressing a lot of love. I had this insight about relationships. Most relationships are usually the most exciting in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, why? Why are they exciting in the beginning? And I went, oh, because you don't know who the person is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in this way of discovery.
Discovery, yeah.
You're curious, you're wondering, and you're discovering. Then the brain takes over and you figure them out. Okay, now I know the way Stephanie is. Now I know the way Catherine is. If I want this, do it this way. If I don't want, and so it becomes formulaic. So I
Mm-hmm.
made a promise to Catherine, which I don't keep, but I love the promise. To never know who she is.
Mm-hmm.
So every day I have to discover newly, who am I married to today?
Mm.
And like I said, I don't keep that, but that's an aspirational promise to
Mm-hmm.
live in discovery with Catherine rather than to live in knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at and I'm so blessed because Stephanie, it's like she lives to look after me, yet she's a very
She
accomplished
lives to
business
look after
person.
you. She doesn't need you. And yet you guys have such a powerful partnership.
It's crazy how much she spoils me. I'm not as good at it, but she's come to realize one thing, that we live on a nice beautiful large property, and
You
I mow
do.
lawn and I do all sorts of things. I make sure that she doesn't ever have to worry about whether the lawn's mowed, and sometimes it takes precedent over a lot of things because I want to get stuff done, all the rest of it. And she goes, she'll say to her friend, "I know Patrick loves me because he mowed the lawn today." It's so true. It's the only way I got, to show. Sometimes it's an interesting way of a relationship, and the point is that when you focus on that other person and take
Yeah.
time to do that, it's a whole new appreciation.
Totally.
And but it's a practice. Like, you have to literally consciously do it.
Patrick, when I was on the road a lot, when I worked at Landmark and I was overseas or wherever I was, I had an occasion in my calendar every single day, and it said, Catherine is present to how much I love her. It
Mm,
didn't say so there was either a text, a phone call, a message,
mm,
something, because otherwise I'd get caught up in, I said, oh, we're in a different time zone. She's sleeping, whatever. But I put it in my calendar because I couldn't rely on my brain to do it. But I wanted that result. I didn't want the distance and the time apart to unravel what we had built.
mm. Now, we talked a lot about a lot of different things, but
Yes,
something
we
I want to
sure
get.
did.
We covered a lot of ground here today. I want to go. I want to just add. When we talk about, okay, so how do I want to phrase this question? I have to think about it a little bit, but let me
Good.
just put it out there, and then we can work backwards from
Good.
that. So I'm thinking about operating system,
Yes.
and the fact that we can consciously adjust and understand what our operating system is, to put in corrections and improvements and
Or
do
let's use a computer term. We can update it.
update it.
Yeah.
So what plays into that is some of the things we talked about. Knowing what our values are shifts our operating system, right? Understanding what our purpose is shifts our operating system, because we have to show up and be a different
I,
way.
I think you mean something that you didn't say. So
Okay.
having a purpose or values demands that you update your
Mm,
operating system. It
okay.
doesn't cause you to do it.
Yes.
It
Got
does
it.
not cause, there's all those plaques on the wall about mission statements. And if people aren't actually changing their behavior, they're just slogans.
Well, beautiful. So that is really when then now when we kind of come full circle into this conversation about relationship and we of course we threw in their careers and businesses and all the rest of it, but that's all really being aware and bringing our awareness to our operating system. How do we continue to upgrade and or expand on it, if you will, create capacity, because that's such an important part of it.
Yeah.
I can't say, I can't even express the capacity that I've gained, how much I've
Yes.
stretched over the past, I don't even 5 years. It's
Yes.
crazy,
Yes. Yeah. Because you're open to that.
but it's
Because
intentional. And it,
that's what I mean. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I didn't say it right. You're more than open to that. You're committed to that.
Mhm.
There's something that's very simple in my view and profound at the same time. Three distinctions that I've noticed over the last 6 weeks and have been talking to people about that distinguish us from other mammals. So, one is we have imaginations.
Mhm.
So, human beings can imagine things that don't yet exist.
Mhm.
Good. Yep. For better or for worse, we can imagine calamities. We can imagine, growing. We can
Mhm.
imagine being in an extraordinary relationship. The
Mhm.
second thing we can do is we can commit. So we imagine it. Just imagining, that's like daydreaming. That's tripping. You're
Mhm.
tripping, man. Then we can commit. So you've not only imagined a better Patrick, you're committed to developing it. And
Mhm.
that shapes how you spend your time and your energy. And then
Mhm.
the third thing we can do is we can tell stories. We make up a narrative, whether we want to or not, we make up a narrative about what's going on. And most people don't distinguish their narrative from what's actually going. They think they're a narrative. Oh, I think I'm not good enough. No, that's a narrative. That's not a description of fact. So being
Mhm.
able to, are we living in an empowering narrative? Have we imagined something that inspires us? And have we committed to living it? And I think those three things, can keep us moving forward. So the narrative that I live inside of is that I'm growing and developing,
Mhm.
and that everything that comes my way is an opportunity, whether I succeed at it or not. I live in a world of opportunity, not because I live in a different world than my neighbor, but because the narrative I have about the world is it's rich with opportunity.
Mhm.
And nothing's and the future is not written. And getting back to full circle, you and I get to determine that. We get to write that future and then
Mhm.
live true to it and accomplish it, or have a good time failing to accomplish it.
Alan, we could go on a long time. We're going to have to do a part 6, no
Good.
doubt about
I,
it.
I love talking to you, Patrick. And if the way I get to talk to you is you get to interview me again, I'm game.
Well, and I'm hoping and I'm confident that we bring a lot of great value and a great insights to our listeners that
Yeah,
maybe kind of pique your interest and or set them off on a path of self-discovery and maybe shift trajectory for the better and to give them some food for thought, if you will. I often like to use Wayne Dyer's famous phrase, which is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
love
And
it.
sometimes what I like and love about the podcast and the guests I have and these kinds of conversations is I've got proof of it because I've got lots of feedback over the years. But it really is kind of exciting when that somebody can take a comment, one of those kind of nuggets that we don't necessarily even intentionally throw out there. It's just part of the conversation. And it becomes a fork in the road.
That's
You
right.
know, it
That's right.
literally can be that profound. And, when we talk about, and I love this, the analogy of shifting trajectory, right? Whether it's a golf ball or a snowball you run down a hill, a trajectory at the top of the hill, 1 degree out, goes a long way, and so you can set a very positive trajectory, but it doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow process, and you just really intentionally set a trajectory and start working towards that. And
Yes.
Alan, as we wind things down, I'm going to leave you with the final words. Anything you want to say that you felt you didn't say, or is there any kind of profound guidance, an insight that you want to share?
You just reminded me of a Woody Allen joke. When you come to the fork in the road, take it.
That's true, right? It's actually a great quote. I love that one. I didn't know it was Woody Allen, though.
Maybe it wasn't. uh, uh, so no, I don't have anything profound to say. Just to be clear about that. As final words, Patrick, I just appreciate you. And I appreciate you for the opportunities you provide for others.
Hmm.
And, from the first I met you, you were all about, whether you had named your purpose yet at that point or not, you were so clear that your businesses were about providing opportunities.
Hmm.
And as a byproduct, you got successful. Your life was not driven by the gold ring, getting the symbols of success. Your life has been driven since I've met you by being the real deal and
Hmm.
trying more and more and more to be the real deal in your, as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a business owner. And
Hmm.
there's not enough real deals out there. And I'm fortunate to consider you a friend and a colleague, and for you to share your audience with me. So
You
thank
know,
you.
Thanks so much for that, Alan. And we didn't go through all the rapid fire questions today, but the one question that I don't ever pass on, and that is, what are you grateful for today, Alan?
Being alive and having another day to live true to my purpose.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I, my friend, am always grateful to have conversations with you,
Mm.
to share in these conversations at a time right now. This is very helpful for me.
That's
So I
good.
hope our guests got as much out of it as I got out of it. I'm also always grateful for the life I live, the wife I have, and the family, the health. So thanks very much for joining me on the podcast today, and look forward to the next one.